Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Agency Life. And today we have Frank from Digitopia. And Frank's got this really, really interesting start to, we all have these great starts to our agency stories. I've never heard two stories the same. But Frank had been working in a remote job. And at the time, he was doing some web development on the side. And then the company decided, which is unusual today, this is 2004, that they wanted all the remote workers to get back in the office. It's the other way around. And ta-da, Frank, that's how it kicked off. Welcome to the show. Tell us what happened the day two of you setting up the agency.
Yeah, Clodagh, thanks for having me. I appreciate it. So that was an interesting time. I had been doing some work on the side. I had a side gig or a side hustle before they called it that. Back in let's say the late 90s to the early 2000s. Excuse me. I had had some things going on in a side hustle, and largely what I was doing web development for people. I was a self-taught programmer, and I had built a content management system and whatnot. So I was putting together web projects, and so at the time, the company I was working for, they had said, again, all remote workers come back, and I had moved down to beautiful San Diego here in California.
Love that city. Yeah.
Yeah. And so my wife and I decided, well, we're not really interested in moving back, even though where we were from and where the headquarters was a beautiful location. We weren't willing to move from San Diego. So I had been kind of threatening myself that I was going to, quote unquote, go out on my own for a long time.
Yeah.
And, I kept setting a date, and I was like, well, by this time. So this was kind of the violent shove that I needed to make that happen. And
the universe letting you know.
Yeah. So right away, once I realized like, oh, wow, I'm going to be jobless soon, I scraped together some money. I think I even took out a loan to kind of fund myself for a year. And I just went for it. And so I'd already had some clients because I was doing some stuff on the side, but again, mostly project work. And so I said, okay, I've got to start making phone calls. I got to start knocking on doors. I have to go drum up business and join some networking groups. And so right away, day one, that's what I was doing.
Amazing.
I was out there networking and pounding the pavement and cold calling people and knocking on doors, literally going to offices and businesses and trying to talk to people. I remember one of my first clients was a surf shop, and only because I liked to surf. And so I said, okay, that that might be cool. And I called the store owner and was like, hey, I'd love to do business with you. I'd love to help you. This is what I do. And that's how I got my start. So I never forget that. And I always have to remind people, when they talk about drumming up business and how do they go about it for an agency. And certainly we have many more tools today at our disposal. This idea of thought leadership is much more pervasive. And, look, we're here on a podcast, and we're both getting to showcase our thought leadership and expertise. And there are many different avenues. But I also think that nothing replaces just some good old fashioned get out there, roll up your sleeves, and get off your butt and go meet people. I think nothing is a replacement for that, especially when you talk about professional services businesses, agencies and, many other businesses that are based on professional services. Most of the businesses I come across in the agency space, they don't need 30 clients per month, right? If they landed 2 per month, they're tickled pink. So oftentimes I think professional service firms don't realize that which engine they have that's supposed to be driving their business, or are you marketing centric or are you sales centric is what I often ask, and what I try to get to the heart of. And I think most professional service firms, even marketing firms, are most likely sales centric organizations, sales centric firms. And so nothing replaces just, like I said, getting off your butt and going out and talking to people.
Yeah, meeting them at, we had an episode with FaZe just a few weeks ago. Young guy, 17, entrepreneur, has been grafting away for a long time, all through his school. And he same thing, just recently, he's out there pounding the pavements and knocking on doors and going to networking events. And I think just eyeballing somebody and shaking their hand. The professional services community now is a lot more graduated than when you were starting there, 15 years ago, 16, it's coming up soon, where it'd be like, what web, what marketing? But now everyone's had one or two agencies that they worked with before. It's a lot more common. People are more educated about what they need. So it's much more easier. You started out with the web, but where have you graduated to now? What kind of work would you say most of what you do now?
Yeah, so along that journey, web evolved into adding on brand development work, because I was, I'd been a student for a long time, just in my own personal endeavors of becoming a student of like how brands are created and how brands are positioned and what is the process. And so I'm real big on process. So I created a process and a system to go about the branding process. So we added that onto the agency, and then eventually added on video work and whatnot. We pay them quote unquote full service, but as a small agency, it was just really tough to continue to juggle all of those things. And ultimately what we longed for was some consistency in the revenue. So we wanted a recurring services model.
Yeah.
Whereas what I was on was a project-based business. And so that journey led us to kind of where we are today, about 5-6 years into a recurring services model. Excellent. And so what we're essentially doing for clients now is, we're helping them engage their target buyer personas online through targeted content and offers. And so we're providing the strategy to help drive that program. We have a methodology that we've developed at our agency that we've coined and packaged and branded. We have a book coming out on the methodology. And so that's what we lead with. Strategy is a big part of what we do. And then when we execute, we're creating those content and offers. We're backing it with marketing automation and nurturing. And then we're driving traffic using various traffic channels. So that's essentially what we do now. And what we're really looking for are clients who can join in that methodology.
Yeah.
And be active participants in creating content, especially creating content.
Big one, big change.
Yeah, I think what I've realized over the years is that this idea of hiring your agency to originate content is not really a good idea, at least from my point of view.
Yeah.
I think what we do when we sell clients content is we're really looking at that bucket of time or however we're packaging up that particular retainer line item. We really look at that as editing and packaging. That's what we want to be doing with that time, not origination. And so we let our clients know that if you're not originating, then this is going to be a very slow, painful, difficult process.
Yeah.
So the more you originate, even if it's raw and ugly, that's okay, because then our team is really great at like packaging that up and publishing it, and then getting it out in front of your target buyer personas, either from a new standpoint or a warm or nurturing standpoint.
It's fantastic that you've made that decision. That's been a huge message that's starting to come through, specifically driven by Impact, another DM agency who has been very forward thinking on the clients that they've worked with, that they've helped create video content, create their own content. They've just got much more success, much more like of a partnership relationship with them than this idea of coming up with the content. And let's face it, nobody knows the product or the service better than the client that you're working with. And
Absolutely.
They might not be the best bloggers or video creators in the world, but they can be taught where the content is. Like, they have hard drives, they have they probably have physical files, they have back office files full of this information. Why would you sit there with a blank slate trying to write what's actually in their business already? That's been fantastic. I'm pleased to hear you've made that change there. You found digital marketer 4 or 5 years ago. How did you come across Ryan Dice and the team?
Yeah, so interestingly enough, Ryan and I had an exchange a couple of years before that about a potential project, and I didn't even remember him, and he didn't really remember me. And then I came across an article he wrote about their customer value optimization model, and so that was fascinating to me. And so the more I looked into it, I realized that there was a community behind it. There was additional information. And then I was around for the early announcement of their partner program. And so I said, hey, this sounds really interesting, because at the time we were partnered with HubSpot. We're still partnered with HubSpot.
Yeah.
We're a platinum tier partner as of this moment. And what I realized was that a lot of what HubSpot taught about digital marketing was lacking a lot of tactical information.
It's so true.
So
yeah, absolutely.
So they did a great job of teaching conceptually why and philosophically why you would do this, and maybe barely touched on the process of it, but they really didn't go into the tactical details of the process. And digital marketer, that's what they're great at.
I know.
The tactical process. And they talk strategy for sure, but they have all the tactical details. And so for me, it was a marriage of what HubSpot was teaching and what digital marketer was teaching, put it together. And so I went to one of the events and talked with them about joining the partner program, and we made it happen.
Yeah, I think it's I had the experience of just seeing what the difference is after, I've worked in HubSpot for a long time. And I think when you're in that inbound ecosystem, you do make a lot of presumptions. 6 months of HubSpot material and you know too much, there's so much information there. Whereas I found the DM material really tactical, really practical, and sort of filled in a bit of gaps that perhaps HubSpot kind of jumped over because, they're 13, 14 years talking about inbound, but there are still people out there who are still learning the basics of online digital marketing, which I found a really good compliment. How long ago have you been a HubSpot partner? When did you join that program?
So similar, I think we're going on 5-6 years.
Yeah. So you've come through the evolution there,
Yeah, and I think what's really interesting as a quote unquote inbound agency, we don't even really use that term unless our client comes to us and using that.
Absolutely.
If they're using that phrase, we'll use that phrase. We're really not positioning around that. But I think what's interesting about this idea of inbound is that, I think the promise of inbound isn't exactly what it once was. And I think there's a lot of reasons for that. We could talk about marketplace saturation, and we could talk about the fact that there's a digital agency that opens up every day in your community, and there's a lot of saturation from that side, a lot of marketplace confusion caused as a result of that, and a lot of different experiences that clients are getting as a result of that. So a lot of factors that go into the promise of inbound really not being what it was cracked up to be. And I think what's really interesting for me, and this is kind of the basis of the book I wrote that's coming out soon, there's a couple of things that we're coming back full circle to, which I think is really interesting and exciting. And one is this idea of brand. And I think at the end of the day, the only thing that really wins today in most markets is brand. And the reason is because in almost every market and marketplace, you're going to have commoditization of any given thing, whether you're a professional service provider, whether you're a widget, whether you're, whatever, it comes full circle back to brand, because, all things being equal, your customers can get roughly, the same thing at roughly the same price, delivered in roughly the same way. And so what's the X factor? What's the difference? And it comes down to brand. And the way that's done today is through digital mostly. The way that's done today is through content. The way that's done today is by honing in on very specific relationships. And that's where I think small companies and mid-sized organizations have an amazing advantage over entrenched players, is because if they can get real specific about human relationships and start treating their digital as if it's a relationship mechanism, not a lead generation mechanism, and if they can hyper focus in on very specific buyer personas, I think they have a chance to win. But it's not going to be because they have better features and benefits, or their widget is better, or they were the first to market in X, or they have a response time that's better than whatever. Those things are short-lived. Your competitors will match those things very quickly today. It used to be if you had some sort of technological advantage, way back in the industrial age, you could ride that technological advantage for decades.
Right.
And then the information age came, and a lot of those advantages started, getting kind of like chopped off at the knees. And today, any advantage you might have from a technological standpoint or from any other angle, it's very short-lived. Your competitors will match it. And so it has to come back to brand. And the heart of brand today is how much you hyper-focus in on very specific buyer personas for your brand. And then what are you doing to serve them as if they were already customers through your content and information and the way you create community around them.
Yeah, that's a real advanced conversation there with where you're thinking, because you have been doing this for a long time. So you have figured out some really good elements to be able to get to this stage. Now you're talking about your book. I know this podcast, that thought leadership. So fundamentally, if we go back, you figured out a lot of things on your positioning and standardizing. When I saw this in your notes, I was like, oh, music to my ears. But these things are, are you observing now that agencies haven't really got those metrics and they're jumping streets ahead instead of getting back to, have they got their positioning right? Have they got their standardization and the processes in their business right?
Yeah, I think that's really important for agencies to figure out, especially if you want to grow beyond just a handful of people. Yeah. I think if you just want to stay a handful of people, you don't need a lot of process and you don't need a lot of standardization. You really don't. You can really be about, just a few quote unquote smart brains that are, high touch, lots of experience that they bring to the table. And, you can, handhold client relationships, and that's cool. I think if an agency is looking to grow past that and really create a business model that's not about the founder, it's not about, the rock star consultant, if you will, then I think standardization is important. I think process is extremely important. That being said, one of the things that is the constant challenge when trying to do that as an agency is, clients, when they hire you, they think they're hiring the consultant still, even when you standardize. So there's always, I find there's always going to be a certain amount of deviation from the standardization.
Yeah.
If you want to keep clients happy, there's always going to be deviation from that. No matter how much we've standardized, that's become really helpful in our positioning. It's become extremely helpful in our sales process.
Yes.
But once they're a client, there's going to be some deviation from time to time. Yeah. Now that's a far cry from what we were doing, which is like, hey, we've got the hands, we'll do anything. So we're a far cry from that, and that's great. But if we truly wanted to get productized, we'd have to have a product. You'd have to do some sort of software, some sort of course, something that is not services, because as soon as you have the services aspect, again, your client's just going to want you to do some things specifically for them. You're going to have to, their situation is going to be slightly different. So you're going to have to do your thing a little different. So definitely standardization process are critical, but don't be so, have such blinders on that you forget to have some of that, white glove, high touch in there.
It's teaching your consultants the bandwidth as well to go, okay, well, instead of deviations being this far apart, to limit them and to educate them there are going to be deviations. Use good judgment, make a call. If you've got a partnership with your client, it's a relationship, it's a two-way street, then a conversation can be had. That's a real education process. But over time, you've got, okay, there is going to be deviations. Here's possible 5 instead of what could have been 50 in the past. Right? It's kind of limiting that. That's really exciting. Now, you have big growth plans for the next 3 and 5 years, Frank. Tell me first of all, give us a rough size of how many, ballpark, what size are you now, full-time and part-time staff?
Yeah, we're 20 people, about 2.5 million.
20 people, 2.5 million. Amazing. So what is your growth strategy? So, is it growth people, growth profit, growth revenue, growth number of clients? What's your, the way you're going to grow over the next few years?
So I think we're going to push in 2 directions. It's all based on our methodology. Like I said, I have a book coming out about it. We're going to really center around that. And there are going to be ways to engage the firm that isn't just, retainer services. So we're going to be innovating in that area and really trying to hone in on our audience around that methodology and find people that resonate with that and really speak to them and do a whole lot more.
Can you summarize the methodology as if Granny was listening?
Yeah. So for the marketers that are listening, look, it's a funnel methodology, just plain and simple. It's a funnel methodology. The difference that we're doing there is we're putting a set of philosophies around it that drive how and why you're doing what you're doing.
Nice.
We infuse relationship levels in our funnel, as opposed to just saying like it's only about the lead and it's only about the lead magnet and it's only about. We infuse relationship levels, and then what we have is we have a conversation that drives the kind of content and offers that are appropriate for each level. So, for example, when we say lead magnet, it's not enough to just say, oh, you need some sort of downloadable asset. You just need something. We have a very specific, type of thing we're recommending based on the relationship level before that, and then based on the relationship level after that. So that way we have hyper specificity with the buyer persona, and we also have hyper connectivity between the various relationship levels.
Incredible.
So there's some strategic things that we're doing with our funnel that is a different conversation. For the marketer that's listening, it's a funnel methodology.
Got it. Yeah. Great. Thank you for explaining that. That's great.
Yeah, not a problem.
So
so we're going to be innovating around that, and content and education and some other aspects. And then on the other end, on the services side, I think what we're seeing in the agency services space is, we're going to be doing a lot more of the strategy and the consulting, the coaching aspect of our work. We're doing that now with our clients, but I foresee, a lot of clients who might buy into us just for that only, with no execution. Yeah. And so that's going to be an area that we'll push into. On the execution side, I think there's this area outside of, I'm calling it like a bridge offering, a bridge product, which is, it's not totally marketing and it's not sales, but it's a bridge offering where, we're going to help our clients proactively go get the audiences they want. And that'll be a multi-dimensional funnel experience that's not just like email, right? Yeah. And so it'll be multi-dimensional, multifaceted. It'll be proactive. It'll be going and putting themselves proactively in front of very specific audiences to then tee up sales appointments and sales conversations. And so I think the reason that agencies who I talk to, and they're realizing the need for this, I think the reason the need exists is because this idea of content now and inbound, again, I mentioned the promise of inbound earlier. I think what people are seeing is, I absolutely believe in it from a brand building and brand positioning point of view. And we're going to build a database, and we're going to grow that database fat. And then if we're doing the right things as a brand, we're going to create this amazing positioning over the course of 1, 2, 3, 4 years, right? But if you're an agency, that clients typically like to see results in like 6 months.
Totally.
You don't. Oh my God. No matter how much you preach like a long-term brand awareness and positioning standpoint, that's the right thing to do for your brand. And no matter how much they nod their head,
I know,
and say yes, like 3 to 6 months later, they're like, "Where's my leads?" Right?
Yeah.
And so I think realizing that, I think that's another area that we'll push into is, how can we partner with our clients' sales teams and join the marketing and sales teams together, where we can be proactive and go put ourselves in front of specific audiences, not from the different than like how you might run an ad and target an audience. That's still pretty anonymous. I'm talking about getting really specific and named audiences,
right?
Finding very specific accounts that client might want to be in front of, and creating an experience that allows them to engage those prospects, but not in a way that's just like making a sales pitch and like, here's our offering, do you want to quote? Because we know that kind of like cold attempt doesn't work either.
What are you, with all the technology that's out there, like, and everything that's coming, and obviously you've got a knowledge base and you're exposed to all the things that are, what are you excited about in 2020 when it comes to all the different things that are happening and bringing that into your business or exploring it more?
I'm excited about bringing clients into the strategic discussion more and more, and teaching that to them.
Yeah.
But mostly I'm excited about what I just mentioned, which is just rolling up your sleeves and going and getting the business that you want. And I think that marketing's great. I think marketing automation's great. I think sales automation tools are great. I think, all of these integration platforms are great. Like, the technology to me is not as exciting anymore. And I think that, there was a time that it seemed like a lot of technology seemed to be the promise to
Yeah.
solve your problems, and it was the fix. And the reason you're not closing more business is because you don't have this tool. And I think at the end of the day, the reason you're not closing more business is because you're not getting off your ass and like making it
happen. So if there was like a list in front of you of who you'd like to go after, or if the phone rang and said, hey, we want to work with you, what's your kind of ideal client what's the profile that you're looking for right now?
Yeah, so our ideal profile is a $5 to $50 million B2B organization that is either in the tech, software, or professional services space. The person that would be contacting us is either the head of marketing, head of sales, or on the smaller end of the spectrum, it might be the president, executive team. And the reason they would be contacting us is because they're fed up with all of this shotgun style marketing and outreach approaches, and they feel like they're not being very strategic, and they're certainly not being differentiated in the marketplace because they have a lot of noise and competition in their space. And those would be their pain points. And if they came to us with that, then I could say without a doubt, I can give you a system that is easy to follow. You're going to be more strategic. You're going to differentiate your brand. And when your prospects are ready to engage with you, they're going to know exactly why you're different than everyone else.
Nice. That sounds like great work to do. It's very solid. Now, on agency life, it's not all about the pies and ups and ups and ups. There have been some difficult times, and I love to just open up and ask an agency owner to share some of the mistakes that you might have made. There was one specifically there, and it's for the reason of we are all in this together. As running your own business.
Right.
You could be out there on your own and going, am I going through this? Is it just me? But will you tell me the story there about a partner that you actually walked out the door with 25 grand's worth of revenue in retainer?
Yeah.
Oh, I got goosebumps when I read it. Tell us the story about that, and what kind of red flags did you see that maybe somebody could learn from?
Yeah, so I had a couple of partners at the time, and this was, gosh, I don't know, six plus years ago now.
Okay.
And so things were going pretty well, and we had an opportunity that came across our plate from another bigger agency that was partnering on an account we had, and they had said, hey, we're interested in buying you and merging you into our company and whatnot. And that sounds flattering and all, but when you're like $1 million company, which is what we were at the time, there's just never going to be enough meat on the bone. There's never going to be a value proposition that makes a buyout worth it at that point. And so I was like, hey, great, thanks, flattered, appreciate it. Just now's not the right time. And I think this particular partner was really liking the idea of just having more team members and something bigger. So, I don't fault them for that at all. But essentially, that partner decided to make a move and join that other team. And that other team with our mutual shared client meant that, the work that this person was doing from our brand now moved over to this other agency.
Right. Okay.
And, I think some of the lessons learned there was that, at that point in time in our journey, we should have been further ahead of where we were. Sure, we were doing $1 million, and for a lot of agencies that are listening, maybe that sounds great. But for as long as we had been doing it, we should have been further along. We should have been $5 million at that time.
Right. Okay.
Or more. And the reason we weren't there is there was just a lot of shiny objects chased over the years. And, I made a lot of mistakes in that area of not being focused and being excited by the technology, being excited by
the tools,
all these things you could do, the tools, and being excited by a lot of different things. And so I think that, certainly I could take on a lot of blame and responsibility for, that partner not seeing the reason to stay doing what we were doing. But also, that was just, sometimes that's how things roll. And that was something that we had to deal with. So there was about $25K per month of business that was rolling in from this person on that account. And that went out the door. And so, it left me scrambling a bit to figure out how to replace that. and then also subsequently made some moves after that to try to replace that revenue, which we did with like almost immediately with a small acquisition that we did. But it wasn't even the right acquisition. It wasn't they weren't the right services. It was just, I did it for the wrong reasons.
Right.
And
Yeah.
Made it through it. We survived. Didn't have to lay anybody off. Didn't have to do anything crazy like that. But it definitely was the start of some serious soul searching and figuring out how we were going to focus and really get serious about it.
Was it at that time you discovered EOS and traction?
Right around that time, yeah, very much within that time frame, and so we've been running that for a few years now.
Yeah, so because that's going to help with things like the vision of the business, and if there's other partners in the business, their vision, that's going to clear that out. And if it's you can, if anyone's listening there and they're going, yeah, maybe my business partner isn't on the same page, getting a vision traction organizer, and each person, I always recommend business partners go off and do the work on their own and then come back together to see how far away they are or how close they are together. So having that and having the values, like if his values and your values are different, you've got to have a conversation that before you start rolling that out about the team. Talk to me about the impact of having EOS in the business and how that's helped you with a framework and run things.
Yeah, so one of the immediate benefits that I experienced in setting up EOS and running it in the business is that it just helped me personally not be so emotional about the business and not have so many reactions about the business that needed to be addressed right there in the moment. I used to be guilty of going and just blowing up somebody's day. Like, this is important to me now. This is an issue. Here's what I'm seeing. I just saw this email. And one of the things I learned is that those things can be tabled to the issues list, and then you talk about it once a week. And so what that did was, not only was I being much more respectful of the people around me and not blowing up their day with, what Frank thinks is important at that moment in time, but then it tabled it for another time to where the distance between the moment it happened and the moment we were discussing it, created a space for the emotion to go away.
Incredible.
And it's a lot like some of these spiritual gurus will say is that enlightenment comes the more distance you put between the thought and the reaction, or the event and the reaction, and the more time you put in between those two things, that's when you become enlightened. And so that was kind of an enlightening process for me, was to then put those things on the issues list. And then it might be, one day, it might be several days later. And that time allowed the emotion to dissipate. And I started addressing the issues in a much more professional way and in a way that was much more productive. So that's away,
really powerful.
The weekly level 10 meeting, which is where those issues are discussed. If you're not familiar with EOS, there's a weekly meeting called the level 10. And so the level 10 meeting is probably far and away the most important thing to implement in your business. You don't even have to run the rest of the system, but if you can get the weekly level 10 down and understand how to process issues, that's massive. It's huge.
That alone, because it's one of the things that I've always felt, real, just, I guess, affinity with agency owners. No one ever has taught you how to run that business.
Here's the thing. Agency owners are a lot like the main character in the book E-Myth, if you've read E-Myth.
Yes.
Right. It's this woman who's really great at baking and making pies, and so she opens up a business baking and making pies. And the main lesson in E-Myth is being great at a thing doesn't mean you know how to run a business doing that thing. And that's what agency owners are. It's like, we're fascinated by marketing and we love tech and we love all these things, but that doesn't mean we're necessarily business people. Yeah. And that's probably one of the number one reasons you'll see that industries like the agency world, are mostly filled with sub $1 million companies. Because it's people who love the craft but aren't necessarily business savvy. And that's not a knock on anyone in the agency space.
God, no.
You'll see this in many industries, right? Like
absolutely.
in the book, The E-Myth, right? look at any bakery, it's probably a very similar situation. They love
Absolutely.
baking, but maybe they're not business savvy. So I think those are the things to learn, is if someone's listening and they're ready to take it to the next level and they want to turn it into, a business model that doesn't, hinge upon them and their expertise, then that's the time when it's like, okay, we got to start learning some business skills.
Yeah. And I think this is something, the perception of, well, if you own the agency, that means you've got to be the managing director and you've got to make the decisions and you've got to do all these, like a role that they kind of made up in their head. But the reality is, if you love making web design and UX and web pages, and you own the business, go and get yourself in that role and get someone else to run the business for you. And you can check in with that person on a level 10 and on the management meetings and the annual. So I think if I've seen anything with EOS, it can get you back to the reason you opened the business in the first place.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And treating it like that.
And I think it'll help make it apparent if, you're in the right seat and you are the person that should be the, the visionary or the integrator, as they called it. Maybe you're not. Maybe you're the head of operations. Maybe that's your role.
Yeah, totally. Or maybe you're finance and you're coming in once a month. Just like it, you have to figure out the machine and where it is, and taking the emotion out of it. I just love that with the issues. That's a huge one. I've seen a lot of blow-ups in my life. And even if that's the only thing you got out of EOS as an agency owner listening to this, it'll sort out those issues and take the emotion out. It's a great perspective. If anyone,
I think that.
Yeah, go on.
I was just going to say, I think that really is one of the big things that small business owners have to tackle first, is how do you become much more systematic and eliminate the emotion of it? I know when I end up coaching a handful of agency owners, and the ones that I end up working with, I never make any promises that, hey, I'm going to help you 10x your agency, because ultimately there's a lot of factors that stand between where they're at and 10x.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I think the thing that I always promise is, what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you clarity, direction, and sanity.
Yeah.
And if we can do that, then you're in a much better position to go out there and fight the fight to 10x your agency.
That's right.
And
yeah.
You're going to be in a much better position. But I think that's something that every small business owner owes it to themselves to do, which is get clarity, get direction, and eliminate chaos.
Yeah, that's really, really good. If anyone's listening to this, it's November. So, have you got any goals that you were trying to achieve as we finish out a decade and start a new one, which is kind of exciting? Is there anything you've got in the plans that you want to get sorted for the rest of the year?
Personally or in the business?
Let's do both.
Yeah. So personally, I've been telling myself that I'm going to get back into martial arts, which I had done for a number of years, and I've been off because business has just gotten in the way.
Yeah.
And so I've been telling myself that I'm going to get back. So I'm going to try to get that done here very, very soon. So that's a personal goal of mine.
Nice.
On the business side, this year was all about putting our new brand together as a result of a merger I went through last year.
Oh, nice.
And so we rebranded the combined firm this year in 2019. So 2020, the big goal is all about now stepping on the gas. That now that we put the brand together, we put the product together, we've got the process together. It'll really be about stepping on the gas in 2020.
Brilliant. Is there anything keeping you awake at night, Frank?
I think the thing that I hear from a lot of agency owners, a lot of agency people, and we're not immune to it, is just, client retention is always a big conversation in the agency space. And that's a conversation we have. How do we extend the timeframes that clients are with us? How do we continue to, keep clients satisfied? I think that's the biggest thing that, we're always looking at.
Yeah, that's definitely one that's top of mind, and that customer success and investing and making sure you're delighting and constantly on it. I always tell agencies, when you've sold, that the selling ain't over. It's like, yeah, the selling's going on every single week. It's like, reminding them of the results that you're doing, reminding them of the work that you're doing, and that you're the person bringing them. It's an ongoing thing. Retention is a huge factor. When we're talking about balancing and work and life and all that holistic side of things, you have a very good methodology on how you manage work-life balance. But I think we're all getting to the phase where we know this is what we do. There is no balance. It's just different things. But you talk about having a small circle, a close circle of friends. Tell me about that.
Yeah, so I don't know if I have much balance. I'm obsessed with what I do, probably as much as any entrepreneur, and yeah. I think it's a healthy obsession. You know, I enjoy it. You know, it gives me energy. You know, whenever I lead a strategy day for either our team, our leadership team, or I'm doing it for a client I'm coaching or whatnot, you know, I could literally go like all day. We could go till midnight. You know, what I do is, it energizes me. So yeah. I don't know if I fully have balance there, but what I do have is, you know, I have a small circle of people that I rely on a great deal to really become vulnerable with and share. One group I'm with is, there's an organization called EO, Entrepreneurs Organization.
Oh, yes. And, yeah, I know them. Yes.
Yeah, so they're an international organization with chapters all over the world. And within each chapter, they're broken out into small groups of, you know, anywhere from 7 to 12 people called forums. And so my forum, there's 9 of us in our forum. And about half of us have been together since the beginning of our forum about 6 years ago. And that forum is a very special group of people to me. We meet once a month. And when we get together, we're really diving deep on the challenges that each person is dealing with. And there's such a trust and bond there that these conversations are not superficial. They're very raw, they're very real, and that allows a lot of you know, deep down to just come out, and you get to have those issues processed and experience that, yeah, you know, is way more meaningful than you'll ever have in any, you know, other group that you're going to be part of. You go to a networking event, you go sit down with even some of your close friends, like it's on another level because there's such trust and bonds that are created by the process and by the rules that are put into place. Once you do that, once I did that, I'll remember my Gestalt language as we're taught to speak.
Oh, yeah.
But once I did that, I realized that normal conversations just weren't very fulfilling for me.
I know, it's kind of weird, isn't it? I know, I know exactly the feeling. I'm not great at the old small talk chatteroo at those parties anymore. I want a bit of substance. I want some depth and grit in the conversation. I hear you.
Yeah,
I can totally relate.
That's been huge. You know, wife and a couple of close friends try to be very direct with, and then you have a mentor. So between those, you know, that group, you know, it helps keep things balanced, and, you know, allows me to, you know, express some of the things that maybe I'm dealing with, or, you know, the questions I'm, you know, have in my own mind, and get those out.
Amazing. You like to travel as well, right? What's some of the favorite places you like to go to?
Yeah, one of my favorite places, so I'm not well traveled, but I do like to get away and have fun and whatnot. But, you know, one of my favorite places is Puerto Rico.
Oh,
yeah, I've been there like 4 or 5 times, and I just love it. I love I love that Caribbean weather when it's like humid, and you know, you've got a cocktail in hand, and you're at the beach or in a swimming pool, and and then the people of Puerto Rico are amazing. The food is amazing. And so it's just it's a great place to be. Yeah,
I've heard a lot of great things about it that I have, and it's not too far to travel as well. Like, it's another country, but you don't have to head all the way over to Europe for that.
No, in the U.S., you don't even need a passport because it's U.S. territory, and Puerto Rican people are U.S. citizens, and so it's a great place to go. It's a great place to spend your tourist dollars, and, you know, they're still recovering from, you know, the devastating hurricane they experienced.
That's right. Yeah.
So, you know, if you're at all thinking like that's a great place to go spend your money, the people are great, the food's great, the weather's amazing.
Love that.
You won't regret it. Yeah.
That's so cool. Well, Frank, we'll get to the end here, but there's agency owners out there. You're so experienced. I really am grateful for you spending the time to share your knowledge, like so much experience. But can you imagine out there now around a kitchen table, or there's somebody who's got a side hustle going on and the company has decided that they're going to shut things down or move things and they're going to make the jump and start their agency. What would be the one tip you would give, or two, you can do more, to that new agency that's starting out there right now?
Wow. First of all, if you're considering starting, I would really advise you to reconsider. The reason being is it's an extremely crowded space. And so it's not, I don't think it's a great space to just enter today, just due to the saturation. So, so if you're listening and you haven't yet started, talk to more agency people first. And when I say talk to agency people, talk to people like me who have been there, done that, been in the game 15 years, grown a real business doing it. And, we'll tell you exactly the real deal of what's going on and what you're up against. So I would heavily, just consider if you want to do that. If you're already doing it and you're still fairly new and you're starting out, then I would say, sooner than later, get really specific on the outcome you deliver and who it's for. Because, the world doesn't need another agency. They don't need another person who does PPC. The world doesn't need another team that does, like UX. There's plenty of people out there doing that. I think where you can make a difference is if you understand the outcome that you drive as a result of the work you do, and then pair that up with an audience who wants that outcome more than anything else. And so if you can make yourself an outcomes-based business and kind of throw the word agency away and make yourself an outcomes-based business for a particular audience, then what you do is you go put that value proposition in front of that audience and you will have much better conversations. So for example, if you focus on, if the thing you do is drive, appointments, and you can do that really well for martial arts studios, then you're not an agency. You're an appointment setting, an appointment generation agency for martial arts studios, right? Like that value proposition is different. And so whatever it is, that's just some corny example, but whatever it is, like get really dead serious about the outcome and who it's for. And then the second thing I would say is don't get married to the idea that the way you drive that outcome is through your hands, right? It's through your agency services. Obsess with the outcome such that maybe the way you do that is through direct mail. Maybe the way you do that is through a software you created. Maybe the way you do that is through some community membership that you create. Like don't fall in love so much with the idea that it's about like doing SEO and PPC and like building web. Obsess about the outcome. I can't stress that enough, that if you can obsess about the outcome and marry that with a specific audience, you have a much better chance of making it in this very crowded, noisy space.
Amazing. That's fantastic. Well, Frank, the book comes out when? Have we got a date? And what's your preferred mode of people getting in touch with you? We all have a preferred mode.
Yeah, so the book is called Building Your Digital Utopia. It tentatively launches February 4th. That'll be available on Amazon, through the usual formats. If you want to get in touch with me, the email address is the easiest way, Frank at digitopia.agency.
Sweet.
And easiest way to get in touch with me.
And then if agency owners, you say you coach and you work with agency owners, because this is a show for agency owners, is that something you'll be continuing to do in 2020, or is that a closed group?
I will continue it in 2020, but with a very limited group. I only have a few that I'm coaching, and only a few more that I will take on. I am the CEO of an agency full-time.
Yes.
And so this is not a business model I'm running. There's no I'm not going to tripwire you and upsell you into a recurring membership mastermind group. I have none of that at this point in time.
Yeah.
So it's literally just a handful that I'll take on. So maybe a couple of more. So if you're interested and you want to work with me, then get in touch with me. But it is a pretty limited number of people that I'm willing to entertain to continue working.
That's fantastic. Well, Frank, thank you so much. I really appreciate your time here. It's been a fantastic, enlightening experience, and I hope anyone who's listening got as much value as I did out of it.
Yeah, Clodagh, thanks for having me.